Hi, welcome to Foxy Little Nuggets, where the cream of the news meets the curdled milk of reality and then gets injected into your cup of morning tea. Yuck. I want to talk about 0 hours first of all. Labour's latest attempt to make employment better could have a rather unfortunate side effect of making employment disappear altogether. The government wants workers on 0 hours contracts to gain rights to guaranteed hours and compensation when shifts are cancelled at short notice. All very laudable, all very compassionate, all very good. Except, of course, it's absolutely terrible. Because unfortunately, employers have now been asked what they might actually do. And what they might actually do, well, a CIPT survey found that 1 in 5 1 in 3 of the affected employers expect to increase redundancies or make greater use of self-employed and other atypical workers if the reforms go ahead. And there is another actual rather awkward detail. Many people on 0 hours contracts like 0 hours contracts because of the flexibility. It suits them, it suits what they want and what they desire. And that is a recurring problem with governments who try to regulate employment. Sometimes the people involved are very happy with the system they have. They look at voluntary arrangements between an employer and an employee and announce, don't worry, we're from Westminster and we're here to improve it. And 6 months later, neither of them has a job. All the time. Anyway, who are you texting, Prime Minister, is the head of the next one. Andy Burnham has somehow managed to involve himself in a genuine national security mystery. This after exchanging messages with someone he believed was Donald Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles. Except, of course, that it wasn't Susie Wiles. It was an impostor. Someone else. Someone that nobody knows who it was. Now, Professor Anthony Glees has suggested that a foreign intelligence service, potentially Iranian, Russian, or maybe Chinese, could have been behind the operation. Now, this remains speculation at the moment rather than any kind of hardened, established fact. But previous impersonations attempts involving senior American officials have already attracted FBI attention, as indeed has this one. Now, officials insist nothing significant was disclosed, which is, I suppose, reassuring, but it does rather raise the obvious question of how a British Prime Minister got into conversation with somebody claiming to be one of the most senior people in the White House without anyone first checking that it was actually her. Perhaps next week, Vladimir Putin will WhatsApp him from a Nigerian number asking for 20 quid for the meter and saying that he's a prince and he's got 30 billion he wants to give him. Probably has got that much. One of the world's richest men is old Vlad, isn't he? Net zero is now being completely weaponised. Labour has apparently decided that net zero isn't controversial and contentious enough already. So why not deliberately turn it into a culture war? Because, of course, Labour MP Jeevan Sander, who works as a parliamentary aide in the Energy Department, has reportedly described climate policy as a useful political wedge issue, something that fires up the Labour voters while dividing the Tories and Reform voters. Only it doesn't divide them. Tory and Reform are all much of the same opinion. Net zero must die if Britain is to thrive. Whatever your view of climate change, there are perfectly serious questions about Britain's present timetable. For example, is it even technically achievable? No, it isn't. How much the necessary infrastructure will cost? More than we can bear. What happens to energy prices? What do you think? And whether pushing industry overseas merely exports emissions rather than eliminating them. Well, duh. And this is why I say people who push this net zero blarney are all a bit simple, a bit retarded, a bit thick. That's why it's all a left-wing issue, though, isn't it? Now, those questions do deserve engineering and economics answers, but instead, parts of the Labour Party and the Greens and all the other lefty idiots increasingly seem to think opposition as something politically useful to provoke. The only problem is that when they do and the opposition come up with the actual facts and the costs, people out there in the real world will go, "Are you kidding me?" Because if net zero really is the cheapest, safest and most practical energy policy available, wonderful. The world would be doing it, but the world aren't, are they? You shouldn't need a wedge issue. It should be apparent, but it isn't apparent. And even with a calculator, it becomes difficult. And when you actually look at the numbers, you realise, what moron thought this up? North of the border now, we're going up to jolly Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon, she's at it again. She keeps insisting she was completely exonerated and cleared. She was not. The woman lies, but nobody's surprised, because that's all she does is lie. She said she was completely cleared during the investigation surrounding her estranged husband, Peter Murrell. Murrell, of course, admitted embezzling the £400,000 from the SNP. But there is an important distinction here. Sturgeon was not prosecuted. Therefore, she was not exonerated. Not being prosecuted does not mean you're innocent. It's not quite the same thing as a court positively establishing her innocence after hearing the evidence. Indeed, reporting around the investigation says prosecutors ultimately did not pursue a case against her because of evidential provision, not because there was no evidence. It was that they'd had words. There was political decisions. Now, Sturgeon says there's very little point in an inquiry because Murrell committed the crime, pleaded guilty, and the justice system has done its job. Well, perhaps that's her viewpoint, but there's a lot more to it than that. And if she really is as innocent as she claims, then she should have nothing to fear from an inquiry. And so we can rightfully ask, why is she scared of the inquiry? What she got to hide? Did Nicola Sturgeon personally steal the money? Probably not. Was she aware of it? In my opinion, probably. But if everyone is completely satisfied that everything else was above board, then an inquiry will be there and it will be full and it will be wonderfully boring and she will be cleared. Makes you wonder why she doesn't want one. And finally, and a little bit of good news, at least for one woman, there was an Italian woman and she won the little local lottery, €1 million. Nice. And then realised that she'd thrown the winning ticket in the bin. Oh well, she ran out to the bins, only to discover that the bin men had been and thrown away. Why did she throw it away? Well, she took it to a tobacconist where she bought it and the machine says not payable. So she thought it was lost. It was only not payable because the little tobacconist didn't have £1 million, €1 million. She then was told what that meant. Unfortunately, the rubbish had been collected and it was up there in the local dump. Sanitation workers allowed her to search through and astonishingly, she found the ticket. Which proves two things. One, there's still some thoroughly decent people in the world. And two, if a little piece of paper tells you you've won €1 million, perhaps immediately don't pick it up and throw it in the bin. Let me know what you think. Thanks very much. Bye.